So maybe I'm not the only person who feels this way, but tracking really solid bass can be kind of difficult. I feel like bass guitar is one of those instruments that kind of oftentimes gets forgotten about and even thrown under the bus. I mean, you go anywhere on YouTube and bass players are almost always the butt of the joke. You know, Glenn Fricker, you know what I'm talking about. I remember back in the day recording my band and programming drums and writing guitar riffs, and I would even go as far as to like demo songs without ever even putting bass to the song. I was always so curious as to why my mixes sounded so empty and there wasn't even a bass track. And then once I finally had the realization that bass is extremely important to a mix and to the foundation of a mix and adding power to your song, I quickly realized how difficult it could be to have a good bass track that sits well in your mix and holds down the foundation of the song and also sounds good as to where you can actually hear the bass note. And I've even seen in tutorials and stuff that I've purchased, like I purchased Brian Hood's mixing class, and even in his mixing class, he will sometimes use virtual bass to supplement the actual bass just to help hold down the low end even more. So even if you have a good bass setup and you're experienced with recording bass, sometimes it's even helpful to have a virtual bass underneath your actual bass. All this to say, recording bass has never been simple for me, and I just don't really think it's a simple task. You're about to see how often I record an actual bass guitar and how jank this door is. This is a 5-string Ibanez Geo bass. Got this for extremely cheap. We're gonna track this today, and we're gonna look at the benefits of actual bass versus virtual bass. Maybe not a one-to-one comparison, but you know, for a lot of people, this is what they have. And back in the day in my old band, my keys player actually transitioned to be my bass player. I remember him purchasing this Schecter Raiden 4-string bass. We thought it was a relatively decent bass. It was fine. But I remember trying to track that bass and the intonation being off and that being a huge issue because you could actually hear the differences between the bass and the guitar because my guitars were well set up, but the bass wasn't well set up. And then I could tell that the strings sounded really dead. He had been practicing on the bass for months before we actually tracked the bass, and before I knew it, we were trying to boil strings in hot water to make them sound new again because we didn't want to buy any strings because we were young and broke. There's just this whole environment around recording bass and getting good bass tones that kind of lends itself to what I think could be best summed up as just having some help. And I say having some help, but you could also just completely replace it and it would sound awesome. All of this brings me to the topic of today's video. I'm checking out EuroBass 3 from SubMission Audio. All right, so here we are in Logic Pro. We're gonna take a look at a project I threw together this morning, including the bass I just showed you guys, the Ibanez Geo bass. I got that bass for like less than $100. It was secondhand and not a great bass. I'm not sure how much like a decent bass goes for. I know you can get into the thousands of dollars trying to get like the Spectre bass or like a Dingwall bass. You can just spend a lot of money on a really cool bass. To preface, EuroBass 3 is $120 right now as their special launch price. And if you're upgrading from EuroBass 2, it's gonna cost you $70. So let's just take a look at this project. Admittedly, I cannot hear low end as well as I would like to in these cans. But we're gonna take a look at what we got. Here are our drums. No post-processing on those. Here are our guitars for context. Alright, so now let's solo the Ibanez Geo bass. It is running through my Kemper on a Sansamp DI profile, and this is what that sounds like with no post-processing. Alright, so as you can tell, sounds flubby. The strings are dead. I don't even know about the pickup. With that said though, I could totally make this bass tone work in the context of the mix. It would be really not that much of a challenge, honestly. So here we are at EuroBass 3, and we have it on the clean setting. Basically trying to emulate running through a Sansamp or something similar to that. So we're not going to go just DI, but this is what it would sound like on a clean setting. just immediately the top end sounds way better, and it's just very, very clear. And the great thing about EuroBass 3 is that you never have to tune it, and the strings are never going to die. A cool thing to look at though with EuroBass 3 that is not included with EuroBass 2, so if you don't have EuroBass 3, or if you don't have Umansky bass or Grove bass, then you have not experienced what EuroBass 3 has. They have a mixer with drive and tone, compression and girth, and just different ways to shape the tone, and it comes with some pretty cool presets as well. But really, where you can really get into the nitty-gritty with EuroBass 3 are all the key switch map. It's all the different ways to play it. You can slap the bass, pop the bass. There's dead slaps, dead pops, harmonics, slides. You can change how often it alternate picks or just picks up or down. You can force it to play on a certain string. If you want it to be played higher up, then you can do that. And with EuroBass 3, they have actually programmed in palm mutes, which is not something they have on any of their other libraries. So, and really getting a mix-ready tone with this, in my opinion, is as easy as just throwing on a distortion preset. Maybe turning up the girth a little bit. I would probably turn the tone down a little. Awesome. To do exactly what I just did, I would need to go to this bass, and I would duplicate the channel, copy all of this, paste it, make a bass track stack, and then I would have to split the channels to do that. Then we would go, you've seen this trick before. We would go grab Pro Q3, go down a little bit. Then I would take a limiter on that. Let's go to waves, L1. Then I would take another Pro Q. This is really simulating that girth channel on EuroBass 3. So we would do that, and then we would take this bass channel and just get rid of a little bit of the the low end. And honestly, I would even throw that through another distortion if I wanted to do that. We'll go through Saturn. But even with tricks like this, with EQ and with distortion and saturation, it's really, really hard to get a guitar that isn't one set up well, or two doesn't have new strings, or great pickups. It's hard to get the clarity and like the growl out of it that you can get almost immediately with EuroBass 3. And that's just a preset right out of EuroBass 3, no processing on it whatsoever. If I wanted to go even crazier, I would go to EuroBass 3, I would set that as a DI, and then I would go as far as to bounce the track, Euro DI. So then we're going to get the DI, I would mute this, and do the same thing I just did with that, or even better than that, I could do what would be really cool to do. Go back to EuroBass 3, throw it on the distortion setting, get something really mean sounding. I don't even know what they're playing that through, but it sounds awesome. Bounce that down, and now we would go track stack again, do the same processing that we did earlier. Go EuroBass. We would do a high and a low track, and like I said, we would do the same thing we did earlier. Go Pro Q. Just trying to make that low end an absolute brick that does not move. That is the sturdiest of all sturdy foundations. Get rid of any low mids, any high end, just make it just the low end. Then we would go to the high, And we would take that, and since it's already been through an amp, we can just go ahead and suck all the low out of it. And then I would take a little bit of the high out as well. And then you put those together and you got a killer bass tone. Do that versus the cheap bass. Like I said, this is not a one-to-one comparison. I would not even call it fair. However, I think you would be surprised how many people like me are sitting at home with a bass in the closet or a bass on their guitar stand that does not get used often. And if you're like me, I'm not going to go spend thousands of dollars on a really incredible bass like a Spectre or a Dingwall, especially not when it's as easy to program and you can go as in detail as you want with programming your bass like you can with any of the stuff from SubMission Audio. So let's do it back to back real quick. There's no mixing, there's no master bus processing. These are all pretty much as raw as you can get except for the processing you've seen me do right here. Let's see what it sounds like with the cheap bass. EuroBass. Bass doesn't have to be that hard.